Well, hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Kernels. My name is Sam Bouwers, consultant for continuing education at the State Library of Iowa. I have a trio of librarians from Winterset today. David Hargrove, who's the director there, Chris Baumgarn, a programming librarian, and Sally, I don't know your title.
Adult Services.
Adult Services, excellent. So, as you might expect, with a programming librarian and an adult services librarian in the room, we are chatting today about programming for adults at the library. And this topic came about because I was at Winterset and there was just like a raucous meeting going on of just like the most fun people were having. There was popcorn and like treats and coffee, and everyone was clearly having a great time. And then I start looking at their programming calendar, which is quite extensive. And so I invited Chris, Sally, and David here today to tell us a little bit how they got that suite of programs stood up at their library. And so I'm thankful to each of them for their time. Let me quick tell you a little bit about Kernels. If you don't know, Kernels is a series of videos from the State Library, kind of like a video podcast almost, but we feature in-practice librarians talking about what they're up to typically, so that other in-practice librarians can take and learn. So we've got everything on our YouTube channel, also on Iowa Learns for credit. You can view one or more as you have time, but always lots going on. So we've got, like I said, we're here today talking about adult programming. And so I would ask you guys first, I don't know, David, if this question is for you to kick us off, but can you tell us a little bit first about the town of Winterset and about the library?
Yes, thank you, Sam. And we are very honored to be on an episode of Kernels. Winterset is high population, maybe 5,500. We're about a half-hour drive southwest of the metro, and thus we are growing. On average, I think the city of Winterset is growing by about 100 residents a year. And I feel like we are the front lines at welcoming those folks to the community, because what do you do when you move somewhere new? You go get a library card. And so we do our best to show hospitality under those circumstances, but also to communicate all the programs, services, and materials that we have here at the library. I'm thinking about this a little bit, programming at our library. It prompted me to realize that if it weren't for our meeting room, we would not have the opportunity to host patrons of all ages like we do. And I think that goes back to about the year 2000, when they were getting out of the old Carnegie in the downtown area, very close to here. And like many Iowa communities, need to move out of the Carnegie. It's not ADA accessible. So what do? Well, fortunately here in Winterset, they went big. And there was a big brick structure here. It takes up a whole city block. It was the first implement dealership, sort of appliance store, car dealership built after World War II off the square. And it has big windows all the way around the building. And while our staff at first were, I think, a little uncertain about how that would be converted into a library, Denny Sharp, you all know, FEH Design, did a great job transforming the plan, the floor plan, into a library space. But most importantly, for our purposes here, they included a big public meeting room that is by the main entryway of the library. And the advantage that has for programming purposes is that we can host programs after hours. We have a big steel gate that we can shut down, keeping people out of the library, but they can still use the meeting room and the restrooms and the entryway to the public meeting room. So we just check them out, a key, and the system works really well. But having that meeting room not only enables us to host a lot of our own programs, but a lot of it seems like birthday parties, anniversaries. We get a fair rental income from that as well. So if you're listening to this and you're looking at developing your library space, my advice would be to go big on the meeting room. So it starts with the space. But next, I think the next piece of this puzzle was to have a staff person, if not a full-time staff person like we do, devoted to doing programming. And so when they needed to hire a new full-time librarian about 3 years ago, and they retooled the job description to adult programs librarian, and fortunately had Chris come in, and he'll tell you more about his background. But he, in my mind, just does an outstanding job at both developing those programs, which involves communicating with the respective lead presenters, but also shaping them into something that our folks will be interested in, that our patrons will like, and then also communicating that and publicizing that in just about every different format you can imagine. And I think we just use Canva for our flyers. But in addition to doing a flyer-sized promotion, he makes small ones and chops them up so that people can take them with as they're
Before we
checking
get
out.
too far down the promotion road, I do want to turn it over to Chris here to just ask you to jump in, Chris, here and say, so you started about 3 years ago. Kind of what was happening then? What happened in those 3 years that was maybe a major disruption? And how have you seen the program grow and change in the kinds of program offerings that you have?
So when I started about 3 years ago, it was about 3 months before the pandemic hit.
There it is.
So they had already started doing a lot of programming. I would say probably the biggest starter for the library was the coffee group, which started up about a year before I started. And then I don't know if Jerry Fit came out of the coffee group. It had a lot of the same participants, but they had started Jerry Fit maybe 3 months before I started. And it was very, very popular. It actually got up to the point where there was too many people showing up. We had to do a second Jerry Fit the day, geriatric fitness. And then, so 3 months into me being here, the pandemic hit and we shut down, and we were shut down for like a year or whatever. I don't remember exactly how long. And then, of course, when we started up, programming again, it was slow starting, and it took a while to really get that started up again. But I would say this last year or so, we're pretty much full force and doing even more stuff than we did before the pandemic. So from the Jerry Fit and the coffee group, we've broken off even more groups that want to meet on a regular basis.
So when you're thinking about starting up a new group or a new event at the library that you think could be a recurring thing, what's your inspiration for that? How do you decide what's going to be a good fit or not?
Well, mostly that comes from the community. They will come to me and say, we have a card group that meets every Tuesday, and they came and said, we want to play cards. And that started off real small. That was only maybe 3 or 4 people, and now it's like a dozen people that go there. And then from that group, there was a few people who they specifically wanted to play cribbage. So then that group broke up into a cribbage group that would meet every week. And so they come every week and play cribbage. So mostly it is just people from the community coming and asking for the programming. recently started up a cooking club, and that was mine. So that was more my inspiration, stuff that I like to do. Sally does a lot of stuff that you like to do, with arts and with gardening and stuff like that. So, it's a combination of our interest but mostly just what the community brings to the library.
So talk a little bit about that, and maybe this question goes to you, Sally, of how you've been able to sort of share your own passions and watch your community grow and develop around gardening or crafting or whatever it is.
I went to some botanical center classes in Des Moines, and I thought, why couldn't we do that in Winterset? So I started what we called Cabin Fever Gardening series in February, and it was just fun trying to find speakers for them. And the people kept giving me other ideas of who else could come and speak and what else they wanted to learn about. And then I really enjoyed that. I've had a lot of different gardening classes over the years. In fact, we developed the seed library out of that too. And the plant swap, that was another idea we had. And the plant swap went over really well. People would bring all sorts of different house plants and perennials that they wanted to divide. And then we'd do that in the fall. They could swap for the first half hour. Those that brought something got to take things right away. Otherwise, they could just give a free will offering to the friends and buy, whatever they wanted after that. And then while we were doing that one day, one of the master gardeners said, "Have you ever thought about having a seed library?" And I said, I just read an article in one of the magazines about a small library that did that with their old card catalog. Mm-hmm. And beautiful card catalog. Why not use ours? So we worked together on that project and got started. So we provide a lot of heirloom seeds that way to our patrons from all over. And it's really fun to hear their comments, and it's fun to see them browse through those old card catalog drawers looking for different tomatoes or whatever. So that's just part of the gardening part. But I also did like a sewing series, taught a lot of ladies how to sew, and I really enjoyed that. So it's fun just to kind of different people have different interests and want to have different types of programming. It's really nice.
That is nice. So I'm hearing some of these inputs you're saying. So first ask the community, what is it that you're interested in? Start with people who are already plugged in and see what they want to see change or contribute. Start with your staff. So if you've got someone on staff who can do this, what other community partners have you found valuable when doing programming?
Well, when I started, one of the first ones I did, we have our special friends from Imagine the Possibilities. They were actually coming to the library on Mondays. And I had the idea about the same time as our old director, Gene, to see if there was something that we could do for them while they are here, because they're here for like 5 hours or something like that. That's part of their week, is to go out into the community. And so we approached them and said, is there something we can do? Can we do like a craft or something for you guys once a week? And do you want to use our meeting room? Because they were just coming and hanging out at the library. And they loved the idea. I mean, they jumped at it. And I'm sure there's other organizations in people's towns where it's a perfect match. You just haven't asked about it, or, you haven't thought about approaching them or whatever. But that's been perfect. They come in for 5 hours. They play games. They usually watch a movie. I'll go in and do either a craft or we'll play bingo or something. And those are my favorite patrons that come every week. We have so much fun with them. And then kind of the opposite happened with, we have an assisted living place in town. They approached us and they said, do you want to come and do a craft once a month? And that sounded like a lot of fun for me. So now I go over to their place and do a craft once a month. And again, those are some of my favorite people. They tell me stories about growing up and stuff like that. And we just have fun doing crafts and stuff like that. So there's those two organizations. Sally works a lot with the ISU Extension Office and the Master Gardeners. Oh yes, we have the greeter. What would you call them? The local greeters, people who welcome people into the community.
The chamber.
The what?
The Chamber of Commerce.
The Chamber of Commerce. Yeah. So yeah, there's quite a few groups. We've done stuff with businesses too. the hospital, the local theater will show a movie over at the theater. So just a lot of places in town.
That's great.
Yeah.
Before I transition to some kind of maybe bigger picture questions, I know, Chris, when we were doing our pre-work and emailing back and forth on this, you mentioned you had a couple specific tools that were helpful. Do you want to talk a little bit about those now?
Yeah, and these are tools that people might already be using at their libraries, but they're really helpful to me. So the first one is just having a simple spreadsheet with all of the opportunities as far as people who do programs and stuff like that. So I have all the people who have done programs at our library in the past, and then just ideas about what people that might be able to do something in the future. So I keep a pretty good spreadsheet on that. We're really lucky at our library that we have a lot of people approach us all the time about doing programming. So I really don't have to resort to looking at that list maybe once or twice a year. But it's good to have that resource just in case. Another thing is the schedule I keep for me, it works really good. I have specific days where I work on programming, which is Mondays and Thursdays. Mondays, I'm usually doing actual programming most of the day. So I only get like an hour or two to work on programming. But then Thursdays, I have pretty much the whole day to work on that. And then I have other projects other responsibilities throughout the week, like developing the collection and doing cataloging and working with the actual collection. And I think it's really good to kind of have those, if you're just doing programming the whole week, which I've had a job like that before, you go crazy after 3 months. You've got to have other responsibilities to kind of break up that monotony.
One thing I love too is, I'm sure different programs lend itself differently, but when you are doing, say, collection development and programming sort of hand in hand, you can kind of look and say like, man, there's a lot of stuff coming out about this particular topic. Wouldn't it be cool to do a program on it and highlight some of our new books or whatever it is too?
Yeah, that's true.
What was that, Sally?
I was going to say, tell them about the Instapot classes. When the Instapot was a big thing, you remember just not too long ago, we had I think it was one of our patrons that was just telling Jean, our other director, about using their new Instapot. And so maybe she was the one that approached them about giving a class. So he and his mother had all sorts of recipes, and they came and they presented this Instapot class Saturday after Saturday after Saturday. They just kept requesting more classes. They'd fill up so fast, and they'd make so many good dishes, and then they would get to sample all these different dishes, and they learned about which Instapot works best and just how to kind of operate it and everything. So that was really nice that we could do that right at that time when it was really a hot item,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Cataloging, or we did a lot of book buying in the Instapot area and the air, so we'd have books that they could check out too. So
yeah. Now, I know when we were doing our pre-work, you guys mentioned the Who-Fi community calendar as another tool.
Oh, yeah.
So
we love the Who-Fi calendar. Before that, we were using kind of a combination of Google calendars and what was that other calendar?
Sign Up Genius.
Sign Up Genius.
Yeah,
there you go. And this really combines everything, and we don't have to deal with advertisements or thinking about paying for it and stuff like that. So that's been a really good tool for us. It's like everything all in one. You can keep track of your numbers digitally. You don't have to keep a little Post-it with all of the attendance and stuff like that. So that's great. And then the last thing I would bring up, and this was something that was developed before I got here, and people might use this already, but I'm just going to bring it up here. It's a program intake form. So it basically has all the details of the program that you're going to be doing, the contact information and stuff like that. But then at the very bottom, it's got a checklist of everything I want to do as far as advertising and stuff like that. Yeah. So maybe I want to get in contact with the chamber. That's on here. Did I do a graphic and stuff like that? We have a TV screen that flashes through all of our programs. Did I put that on the screen? So this is very helpful for me to go through this for each program to make sure I'm doing everything I can to get it out into the community.
Is that something that stays on paper for you, or do you have a digital version of it?
No, I do it all on paper. If anybody wants something like this, they can get in contact with me.
Well, what I was going to say is, could we post the blank version of it up as an attachment here? Can we post that? Yes. Awesome. Yeah, sure. I'm sure people love to see that, because it's, there'll be modifications that I need to make for my library. Maybe I don't have a TV screen, whatever, but even, well, what work it is to have that regular cadence of promotion. Say, oh, we do the cribbage club every week, but we still want to have some regular rotation promoting and going through that as well.
Right.
Hey, David, I want to flip it back over to you for kind of a bigger picture question here. But you've used the phrase several times, Winterset is lucky. And actually, I think every time I do a kernel, I hear that phrase sometime throughout the recording is, our library is really lucky. But and so maybe this is another Winterset is lucky question, but do you get any pushback from your board or from the city to say, the library, people just check out books there. Why are you guys doing Tai Chi? Why are you playing cribbage? What's all this ruckus? Do you get any pushback, and how do you handle that?
No, absolutely not. In fact, we get more than anything compliments during the pandemic, when we had suspended programming. That's when we got the pushback. And as you know, some folks were more eager to get back into gathering than others, and sadly that became very politicized. But as soon as we felt like we could safely resume programming, we did. And the comment that I kept hearing from the Jerry Fit folks was, this is our community space. This is our living room. This is our gathering place. And we as seniors are taking the steps we need, e.g. vaccinations, to be able to resume gathering. And so we're ready to do it. And so we really took the cue from them. I think the only pushback I've ever heard of about programming in this library had to do with the potential conflict between offering something for free that might be, as we do in public libraries, that was available commercially out in the community. And I think it had to do with photography lessons or something like that. But that was, only one instance. Overall, I just get comments about, wow, not only do you have these great programs, you're promoting them really well. And one thing that I like we've done is to get this wire display rack. And I don't know if you've ever seen these things, but they're like 3-sided wire, tall, about 6.5 foot tall, rolling racks. And so we have that in our lobby to give us additional surface area, if you will, to promote those programs. And so like Chris said, he checks all the boxes for promoting. And really, when people see that for the first time, they're just like, wow.
Well, that was my impression walking into the Winterset Library was, look at all these awesome programs for grown-ups.
Which is why the pandemic hit us so hard, because Chris had just been in the job and we were really starting to develop that strength right when the pandemic hit. So we're excited to get back to that. But no, I think all it does is bring us good attention. And it's the kind of attention I think you want if you're looking to fundraise for your library, for instance, because not only do you have the traditional brick and mortar services associated with materials, you've got the programming. And another thing that makes that possible here in Winterset, we don't have a YMCA. We don't have a community center like a lot of towns do. And so that falls into our domain here. And wisely, they provided for that about 20 years ago with the facility.
Yeah, so it's not like you're necessarily competing with the rec center or the senior center or something, but you're kind of helping fill that gap for the city. I love that. So I guess in closing, and I don't know if this goes back to Chris and Sally, or maybe all three of you want to chime in here, but I obviously programming for youth takes a huge priority in a lot of towns, but more and more as Iowa's population ages, I just heard the story from a librarian who said, 10 kids moved out of town, which means that my total registration for summer reading would be like less than 100 kids. The towns are that small and they're losing young people that fast. And so more and more people are looking at adult programming. So how would you sort of encourage people to get started in this vein?
I would go with the coffee group route. I thought that was a real good starter. Actually the guy who doesn't run it, but he makes the coffee group, he told me the other day, I only drink 2 cups of coffee a week. One is at the coffee group and one is at church. So
it's good company right there.
Yeah. And so we get, kind of the older folks and really pillars of the community too. And they've always got really good stories. It's fun to sit in there and hear what they have to say. But yeah, that's a really good starting point, and ideas can come out of that. But otherwise, what you said about, talking with your patrons and just seeing what they want to do. And, really the other thing is just trying stuff. It's okay if you try stuff and nobody comes. I've done that plenty of time, and I've just, nothing came of it, but just try stuff. And if nothing comes of it, that's fine, but it could turn into something really great that the community likes. So I think the 3 things are really kind of key.
Yeah, I will say, and I do want to hear from Sally and David as well, but when I ask that question at the end of a lot of kernels, so often the answer is like, well, try it out and see what happens. I think we so often get this sort of fear of like, oh, I'm going to do that class or recruit that presenter or do that thing. And it's like, no one's going to come. And it's like, okay, well, you tried it, you checked it off. Now you know to do something else or promote it differently maybe, or do something else. But Sally or David, Sally or David, any thoughts to close us out here? Anything you'd like to add?
I think just starting small and with your own interests, like if you like David was doing chess, really into chess. He started a chess club here, and a lot of the kids started coming, and there's all ages that come to this every Thursday night. And I think that's really a neat thing that he offered that. And
some of those kids really get into it. And I know that's really good for their brains.
And it's a good way for them to make close friends too. It's kind of interesting to see how these friendships have developed there too at the chess club. But it's really a neat thing that we can offer. And I'm glad David took his interest and brought it to others and is trying to help them learn how to play chess and spend that time with them. So that's
It's the same with an acoustic music program we have, which just reflects the passions of our staff people. And so that, if I were getting started, I would sort of take an inventory of our staff, your staff people.
That's a great idea.
What are their passions? What could they do? What can they represent? And for instance, if you have someone who is a youth services librarian, you can bet they should at least like kids and like working with kids. And so start with, like Sally says, start small. And that means what you already knew how to do. And from there, maximize the best use of your space. And that's the trouble, I think, in a lot of libraries, is finding that space. And I know that a lot of libraries have had to base their fundraising on this notion that we need a better space, not so much for programming, but for collections. To do that, though, you can start those programs in the library.
Yeah, absolutely.
And another thing is you find out too from how much the people spread the word, that come, they think, oh, that's really neat. And they tell their friends, and then their friends are coming to the coffee group, and then more friends are coming, and it's really neat. And then they come up with all these ideas of other things they want. So that helps us.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that that's a real hallmark of programming for adults in general is that, when you've got a group of kids, for example, if you think about the difference of programming for kids versus programming for adults, there's not quite as much agency or voice there. And I do know that you want to solicit opinions from kids and whatnot, but like you're not really going to ask the 3-year-olds like, hey guys, did you want a dinosaur story time next week or a bulldozer story time? I have a 3-year-old son, so these topics are top of mind for me. But if you're programming for adults, you guys would say like, hey, did you guys want to do that gardening class again? Or were you thinking we could pivot to something different for this year? So really take advantage of the fact that you have people with opinions and voices to share. So that's great. Well, we will post that sort of programming checklist that you mentioned, Chris, as a handout in Iowa Learns in YouTube. You can find that as a link down in the show notes, which I love to say. I feel so cool when I say that out loud. But I just want to say a big thank you to David, Chris, and Sally for taking time today. Kernels is one of my favorite things to record and do. And it's just such a treat to hear about all the fun stuff going on. So we'll throw some contact information up on the next slide to follow, but get in touch with the Winterset Public Library if you have thoughts or questions for them. Definitely worth a drive down to Madison County there. Right, the bridges and John Wayne, and who was the trumpet player you were telling me about when I was there? Wasn't there a trumpet player? No, did I have that wrong?
Baseball.
Baseball. Sorry.
Fred Clark.
There you go. Well, Winterset Public Library, a beautiful facility and definitely worth the drive. So thanks to you guys for your time.
Thank you, Sam.
Thanks for watching.
Sam.